Hello, everyone. I hope you can all see me. We're going to give it another 30 seconds or so to let people join. We've got quite a lot joining at the moment. Seems to be coming along well. But welcome to our AIM Group, sponsored by Kaisa, webinar today on unlocking value, specifically about how C2B models in automotive benefit marketplaces. So just give it a few more seconds and then we will get going. The agenda for today is we're going to start with a very brief video from our sponsor Kaisa. We will then get into the webinar. We're going to talk for probably about 25 minutes. We've then got a brief presentation from Kaisa, from Matthew Rizal. And after that, we will get into questions. And I suspect there are going to be a lot of questions today. We've got a particularly big potential audience out there today, which is really great. And I think there is an awful lot to explore on this topic. So, Jess, I think we're probably ready to run the video, please. I'm going to step off the stage for a minute. Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to invite our three panelists onto the stage now. So if they can make themselves appear, or somebody else can make them appear, whichever way it happens. And once they're here, I'm going to ask everybody individually to introduce themselves. So would you all briefly, and I'm going to start with Julian, introduce not just yourself, but your business. Tell us where you are on B2B. Tell us about your B2B, C2B rather, revenue model, and tell us a little bit about the competitive situation in the market, as all of those things seem to affect the approach people take. And once you've done that, hopefully we'll still have a little bit of time left for everything else. So Julian, maybe you could kick off on that front.
Morning, everyone. So my name is Julian Schneider, and I run strategy, corporate development, and operations at Cars Commerce. So we started 25 years ago as a kind of pure play classified cars.com and expanded the business since, and last year rebranded to Cars Commerce to reflect kind of the broader capability set we bring to our dealer and OEM partners. We made an acquisition 2 years ago called AccuTrade, which was kind of the foundational capability for us underpinning our C2B model. And so we are, call it year 3 of that, inside year 3 of that journey. And I would say the main model for our C2B offering today is effectively a subscription offering for the car dealers. So the C2B motion comes bundled in an appraisal and used car optimization SaaS offering, which I'm sure we'll get back on that a little bit later. And finally, in terms of competitive environment, I mean, the US is a pretty highly competed market, so consumers have a lot of choice, right? Going from Carvana to CarMax to a lot of different consumer-facing destinations to get values on the car, and so a lot of the essence of our move is really how do we actually help enable every car dealer to have as much sophistication as CarMax and Carvana, for example, for a fraction of the price or a fraction of the investment they would have to make to match the capabilities. Did I hit all the points, Jonathan?
I think so. Yeah, thank you. Matt, do you want to go next?
Of course. Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Cockrell. I'm trading director at Carwow. Carwow started over 10 years ago now as just a simple review site. But over the last 10 years, we've become one of the largest online car changing destinations in Europe. Last year, we grew over 50% with nearly 3 billion worth of cars bought on our site. over 1.8 billion worth of cars listed for sale through our C2B or Sell My Car service. We're also about 3 years into our C2B journey. I've been focused for those 3 years on scaling that proposition, which started with an acquisition of a small company called Whizzle. And it's now a really key part of our overall CarWow proposition today. In terms of our model, we charge our dealer partners a per transaction fee related to the value of the vehicle they're purchasing, so slightly different to Julian. And in terms of the competitive space in the UK, it's getting quite competitive now. There's lots of businesses operating in this space. I think Motorway are probably the business with the most similar model to CarWow from a C2B perspective. But there are plenty of other direct car selling experiences like We Buy Any Car as well, which consumers have access to.
Brilliant. Thanks. And Ivo?
Cool. My name is Ivo Wassenaar. I'm working for Swiss Marketplace Group as their Director Private Clients. Before this, I've been working for Adevinta in the Benelux, for OLX in Indonesia, where I actually also was involved in C2B and also C2B2C. We set up our own showroom in the heart of Jakarta back then. And my career started at eBay Classifieds Group in the Netherlands. In terms of business, Autoscout24 Switzerland is part of SMG, and it's basically completely separate from the rest of the Autoscout group. SMG is a company that also has various real estate and general marketplace platforms in the Swiss market. In terms of size of the country, and get a better picture with Switzerland, we're roughly 10 times smaller than Germany when it comes to used car transactions. However, the average value of a used car on our platform is 40k in euros, which is a lot higher than our neighboring countries, I would say. And as you know, we're not part of the EU, and therefore import-export is quite challenging. Hence, we're a fairly isolated market. C2B recently launched on the 22nd of August. Several tests conducted, but never found the right model or never found the right time to really enter. Now we feel that some clear winning models are appearing. And that's why we launched our own self-inspection plus auction model, similar to Motorway, CarWow, and some of the Scandinavian markets where we have Wheelaway and Autovex. We did this together with a partner called Car Auction, which is a well-known online B2B auction marketplace in Switzerland. We monetize the same way as CarWow does, and we compete. We have vertical players that we compete against in the market as Autolina and Car Market. Also, we have more horizontal players like Facebook. And in terms of C2B, it's fairly disorganized yet. And many of these transactions are happening offline or trade-ins.
Brilliant. Thank you all. So before we get into the other questions, quickly for the audience out there, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We won't deal with them immediately. We'll deal with them when we get to the chat section. But the more warning you give us, the better we can give answers. Thank you. So just quickly round the table. Is anyone able to share, give me a sense of what size your business is, or at least what position you're in the C2B space? Resounding silence.
I mean, I can give a start. I mean, I think maybe to give a little more context on how we think about the space. I think for us, we don't necessarily look at this as kind of purely segmented C2B business opportunity, but rather for us, it's about like a comprehensive SaaS offering that helps dealers effectively handle C2B, trade-in, whether it's remote, in-store, in the sales department, the service lane, right? Or also help them think about inventory optimization differently. So that's kind of for us, kind of the core segment we think about. And so we have about we disclose that we have about 1,000 dealers on our AccuTrade platform to date.
Brilliant. And Ivo, can you give a sense? I know you only just started, but how far have you got?
First full month has generated roughly a little bit over 100 cars, which is more than we expected initially. So it's a good sign.
And Matt?
Yeah, I can give some rough numbers. I think year to date, we've had about 180,000 cars listed for sale on our site. And we've got about 6,000 dealer accounts verified for bidding as well. So reasonably sizable on both sides of the marketplace.
Nice. Brilliant. Thanks. So between you, we've got, I think, a small acquisition, a very big acquisition, a partnership, a little bit of a lot of organic growth in CarWow's case after the small acquisition. You've all taken approaches that bring in expertise in some way. What's driven the particular approach you've taken? Just very, very quickly. Julian, do you want to kick off again?
Sure. I mean, I think we looked at the space. I think the underlying capability for us was something that was important to have some distinctive IP in. And I think as we scanned the space, we came across companies that were maybe more nice conveyor belts, right? Like nice UX, but not with a lot of underlying IP, which weren't as much interesting. I think the more we dug into the space and the more we were interested in actually having something differentiated. And so the reason we settled on AccuTrade was really two main things. One was some interesting IP to help dealers and consumers understand mechanical condition of the vehicle with OBD2 port output and have that straight married up to a vehicle valuation or vehicle value. And then having actually a team of expert analysts that provides primary first-party values on vehicles as opposed to relying on third-party valuation guides. So for us, as we settled on kind of distinctive IP, then it really became a question of speed, right? On like, do we acquire the capability today or do we spend the years to build it? And so that's where we landed.
Makes sense. Ivo, a bit different for you, I think.
Yeah, it's actually threefold. So I would say faster time to market. We overcome the cold start challenge, and maybe the most important one, we allow dealers to stay within their current environment where they're already used to source stock, and we bring this stock to their environment as opposed to them downloading multiple applications to look for stock. So we basically bring it to them. So it's a big convenience driver for dealers as well.
But do you think there are downsides to the partnership approach as well?
Obviously, there's always downsides to partnership approaches, but for us, it's the best approach possible in this market.
Yeah. Okay. Matt, you've kind of, in a way, had the most organic approach, so and achieved some pretty big volume fairly quickly. So what drove your approach?
Yeah, I think, as you said, we started off with a relatively small acquisition in the middle of 2021, and it worked really well for us as we were able to take what was great about both businesses and connect them together to really scale rapidly. So we acquired a business that was actually monetizing users reasonably well and had really strong relationships with some key dealer partners, but they were really struggling to scale on the customer acquisition side. And so if you connect that business to Carwow, which already has a large and very highly engaged customer base, it means that we're able to get that business really growing rapidly, which in turn then meant that we could invest more in the proposition. So I think it was good things about the two coming together at the right time.
Okay, and you've all got different models. Do you think there is a best model for marketplaces? And I guess one question in the back of my mind is, are we moving towards auction models over guaranteed price models, or is there a place for both of those still within the mix? Maybe stick with Matt for the moment.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is we've actually been through a couple of different models over the first 3 years. We started off with what we call the quote and accept model, which is just where dealers are placing bids against vehicles and the sellers then have a choice on whether to accept or reject that bid. And about a year in, we switched to an auction model. We believe that moving to an auction model will actually benefit all the parties involved. I think for sellers, we felt like an auction, because of the competition it drives, would be getting them a fairer price for their car. For dealers, the process becomes simpler. When the stock's going to appear on site, you can design your processes around that. And they place a single max bid on our site, and then we do the work in incrementing for them. And then for Carwow as well, the need to broker or support individual sales is reduced because the cars that sell through auction don't require as much contact from our teams. So I think for us, as I said, we started with that quote and accept model and moved towards the auction model because we think it brought some significant benefits for everyone.
Great. And Julian, I think you've got different models working in different places within your business. Could you kind of talk us through the different variations that exist within Cars Commerce?
Yeah. So it's I think effectively it depends on where you start your consumer journey. And so our approach, if you start on a dealer website, for example, or you start on a dealer's vehicle detail page on the marketplace, that's really the dealer's real estate effectively. And so at that point, it's a fixed price, no competition, no competition with other dealers for the consumer. It's really around how do you actually bridge and create transparency and information symmetry between the parties to say, hey, this price is actually a fair price for the vehicle at hand. But then if you go on our marketplace and go onto cars.com, sell your car section, there's more of an auction logic to it, where dealers have the ability to actually select vehicle types of interest and kind of boost pricing from a base price effectively.
So, and on dealers' own sites, can they affect the price that's shown, or are you dictating that from your models?
They have the ability to go up if they wanted to be more competitive in their local marketplace for given cars.
Are they able to make themselves less competitive as well?
No.
Okay, so they can only improve
the base price stays the base price. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. That's a fascinating approach. Ivo, for you, how do you feel about models and where the models are going?
So I would agree to what Matt has just been saying on the auction model. I think it's very important to look at a balance between the value you deliver to your private sellers as well as your dealers. And maybe to add on top of it, an auction also gives the feeling to private sellers that they indeed got the best C2B offer out of the market. If they see, hey, there's 7,000 dealers being able to bid on my car, I actually received 100 bids. If I don't sell through this C2B solution, I will never get a better price anywhere else. So indeed, I think the auction model is really the winning model as we see it, with one caveat. It depends on the maturity of the C2B market you're operating in. Some markets are really built around the older model of having a fixed price and then going to a dealership. It's also hard to turn that around, I would say. So it depends on the market. And maybe the last element is the definition of trust in the market. Switzerland is a very high trust market, just like the Scandinavian markets. That's maybe a market where self-inspection then auction model works better than in very low trust markets.
Okay, and can I ask you guys about trade-ins? I think only Julian does trade-ins at the moment, or does Carwow? I don't think Carwow does trade-ins at the moment. Do trade-ins need a different approach? And maybe start with Julian there, and anybody else can add in around it.
I mean, I think it's, as I was saying earlier, I think there's a similar dynamic, right, within trade-in and kind of a more kind of auction-based model. I think in all cases, you're looking to get discovery around the vehicle condition, and then have both parties actually talk about describe the condition and align on what the impact is, right, up or down on the vehicle value. And so I think for us, it's really about having the same underlying capabilities, so that no matter what channel you go to as a consumer, you actually end up seeing consistent information and consistent approach. So whether it's a trade-in on an OEM website, a trade-in on a dealer website, a trade-in on the marketplace, or an auction model when you go cars.com/sell, you actually end up having that consistency. And then I think it's more a matter of where the consumer is in their journey. So we see those as very kind of complementary from a capability standpoint, and critical for dealers to be successful and kind of regain some of the lost grounds they've had to some of the pure play kind of digital retailers in the US.
Do you think the consumers who go for trade-ins are less price sensitive, and are they more open to just a simple here's the price model than something that's competitive? And do you see a different kind of car? Do you see higher value cars going through the trade-in route?
I think there's I think a lot of kind of nuance in the segments, right? Like I think if you start with in the US, each state has different regulation around sales tax implication of a credit of a trade-in. And so in states where you actually get a sales tax credit for your trade-in. The trade-in route is much more compelling than in others, and so that's one of the factors. And then I think there's also just the driver of if a consumer is really locked into a new car that they want to have, right? There's also value in being able to get rid of the car you came with in the moment, because the US market is a very kind of in the moment, get your car the day you say you want to have a car, right? It's a little bit less as in Europe, where you have the latency of go to a dealership, order, and then wait 12 weeks until your spec car shows up. So those are probably the two main drivers on like user segments you would find within that world.
Matt, Nevo, do you want to add anything on that, or should we just move on?
Okay, I was going to make a quick point around the point you were making around price sensitivity, which I think is a really interesting one. We're not doing trade-ins on Carwow, but how we think about that price sensitivity across different segments is quite interesting. And a concept we talk about quite a lot is the trade-off between effort and value, and how that relates to the different car selling options that consumers might choose. So probably have trade-in at one end where it's really low effort, but you maybe aren't getting the best price. And then all the way at the other end, you probably have private sale where it can be really tedious, but if you're willing to put in the effort, you probably get a great price for your car. And where we're trying to operate as a marketplace is sort of in that middle bit at the moment, trying to find that sweet spot between sellers who want a good price, but they don't want the hassle of a private sale. And so that's sort of our starting point. And then if you're able to have that sweet spot and then reduce the effort and increase the value at the same time, then you're on to a winner.
So the first question in your journey is, are you lazy?
Not at the moment, no. But I think it's an interesting concept to think about different consumers.
Let's move on to the question then of what are the real strengths marketplaces have versus the C2B specialists? And can you beat the specialists, or should marketplaces be aiming to buy somebody and build from there? So, Ivo, do you want to kick off on this?
Yeah, I can give a quick answer to this one from our side. So clearly the biggest advantage for marketplaces is that you already have loads of private sellers and buyers active on your platform. So this means very little acquisition cost. So that's like an area where you don't have to compete. I think it's very important in terms of integrating access points to C2B. Don't only think about the private selling flow, but also think about putting it in front of people that are only searching for cars, because this is also your target market, right? So you don't eat in, you don't cannibalize your private selling only, but you really look at this people that you tell, or you basically just called lazy, Jonathan.
Apologies to anybody out there who's lazy. Ivo, you're 100 cars, well, a bit more than a month now in. Are you seeing any cannibalization? Can you tell at this stage? Is it a worry and a risk?
Beforehand, it was a big worry and a risk. Of course, we listen also to other players in other markets, and the story we always had, it eats more into the trade-in market than it eats into the private selling market. So far, we can say that's correct. We don't see any big cannibalization. If it's there, it's really, really small. However, it's obviously a big risk for us because we monetize private sellers quite well in the Swiss market.
And Julian, looking at your business, I mean, clearly for all of the businesses, what marketplaces can bring in marketing and inserting in the journey and so on is key. Where do you see, I mean, going a little bit more detailed than that, where do you see the real kind of advantages in terms of the site? And are there things beyond what you're getting in marketing benefit that really help you as a C2B player?
Yeah, I mean, I think audience really, right, is the lifeblood, right? If you start with, like, our starting point is 28 million uniques that come to our site each month, and so that's a massive advantage to anyone. To Ivo's point earlier, right, having the cold start problem. But I think beyond the audience, I think there's also a point of relative specialization and alternatives, right? Like if you in the US, private party transactions, a lot of them flows to places like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, OfferUp, right? And so it's like those horizontal generalist marketplaces don't really have the ability to show as much context around what the underlying vehicle is, right? And so I think that's where, when you get used vehicles that are maybe more than a few $1,000s, I think that's when the context matters. And so I think having the ability to really gear your experience to the underlying asset you're talking about, I think is an advantage to the more generalist providers out there.
Okay. So, and are there any kind of real advantages a marketplace can bring beyond simply its audience and its scale, etc.? Are there any kind of skills advantages or other types of advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I think for what I was touching on earlier, right around the IP we were excited in acquiring with AccuTrade, is those are the types of capability investments we can make to make the product better, right? That then you wouldn't find in horizontal players, and frankly, you don't find in many other marketplaces in the US. And so I think the starting point gives you the space to effectively invest in other areas than marketing or CAC, right?
Okay. So, Matt, moving on to a slightly different question, what are the biggest problems you've faced in executing so far, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, I think I'll touch on a couple. I think one is definitely pricing. And when I say pricing, I mean basically becoming that balance point, or finding that balance point between what a seller's expecting for their car and what a dealer's actually looking to buy it for. I think often you're taking a seller whose expectations have been guided by what they're seeing on private sales sites, and a dealer who's obviously trying to make a profit on a particular vehicle, and you're trying to get them to meet somewhere in the middle. And it's a really complex problem. I think that's why we're investing really heavily in our own pricing capability. But we're also making sure that we're educating and explaining at the same time, particularly to sellers, why a particular vehicle would be worth a particular price. And another area, which I won't go into too much detail now, because I'm sure we'll come onto it, is making sure that we're providing dealers with a really accurate assessment of the condition of a vehicle. I think that for us is absolutely fundamental to building trust and stickiness within the market.
Okay. Ivo, in your very early days, what kind of problems have you run into, and what have you had to change in that first month and a bit?
Very limited challenges so far. We see that in 2% of the cases, dealers are trying to negotiate the price down, which was a bit lower than anticipated. So I think that's great. What we did is really just like startup challenges on the inspection flow, basically small things. But what we did is we implemented a great user feedback tool. So we directly get the feedback from all users in the product, and we know exactly what we should change from the start. So I think that's also what I would like to tell other people. If you're starting this, build this into your product so you can directly react when you see things happening, but no major issues so far.
And have you made any...
Sorry? No, so, and of course, what Matt has been saying around matching the prices, I think that's true for all of us operating C2B. That will always be a challenge, and you'll see that certain segments are doing better than other segments. Yeah, I think that's part of the...
So 2% sounds pretty low to me. Can I ask Julian and Matt, are your kind of quibbles from dealers around pricing as low as 2%, or are they a bit higher than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely the common theme of education for the dealer, because I think the dealers all tend to have a process, right, that they work with, and the kind of historical practice in the US is just try to anchor the consumer as low as possible when they come in, and have a good negotiation from there. And so as we bring more tools to the dealers to be more confident around what the car's condition is, and more context around what the pricing should be, and put a guarantee on the price, those are all the things that actually then help dealers think about the process differently of acquiring a car from a consumer. but that's the thing, right? It's like change takes time, and so I think that's the journey we're on now, is to help dealers really change the process and go from hour to 2 hour interactions to something that can be done in 10-15 minutes. And so the productivity unlock for the dealers can be pretty big once they kind of make the leap from old process to new, more consumer-friendly process.
Okay, unfortunately, we've hit our immediate 25 minutes, so we're going to park for the moment. We've got a few more questions. Well, I've got questions coming in. I've got a few more questions as well. We're going to go to a brief presentation from our sponsor, Kaisa, from Matthew, who is the sales director. So we're going to cut across to that, and we will be back in about 2 minutes or so. Thank you. Let's all go off screen.
I was on mute. Hi, everyone, and thank you for welcoming me on stage. So I'm Matt, head of sales and new business at Kaisa, which I joined in 2020. And basically, I help auto marketplaces, OEMs, and dealer groups build memorable car buying or selling experiences, thanks to the Kaisa customer and dealer engagement platform. So I found the panel discussion super interesting, very much in line with what we observe in the industry. So thanks, Julian, Ivo, and Matt for your insights. And now that we've seen how important is the C2B model for auto marketplaces, I would like to share in that short presentation what we see as the common challenges faced by C2B marketplaces, and how the Kaisa solution help them improve their performance. So since we are working with a few C2B marketplaces, today I would like to start with some takeaways about the impact we generate for them. So first, we allow them to increase by 26% on average the volume of seller inquiries that they convert to the offer stage, meaning sellers will receive a firm offer for the car, which is only one step away from the final transaction. Secondly, we are able to increase the attendance to inspection appointments by 10% on average for our customers. More sellers coming to the appointment means more transactions at the end of the day. And finally, all in all, we generate an increase of 20% on average of transactions for our C2B customer. So how do we do that? All the C2B marketplaces, whatever their business model, auction, trading, face common changes around sellers' experience that are affecting their conversion funnel. So first, on average, 20% of car sellers who make inquiries don't result into a booking to sell the car due to poor handling by the customer service, the agents, or the dealers, or, for example, a missed call by sellers. Next, as it is well known in the industry, from 20 to 40% of inspection appointments are no-shows by sellers, which is the biggest drop-off source for C2B marketplaces. Next, sellers, as we discussed it with the panel, may reject the offer they receive for a number of reasons, and price being just one of them. And in the end, all these friction points imply a loss of time, resources, and a loss of 10% of potential revenue for C2B marketplaces. So how does Kaisa engagement platform help them manage private sellers better and convert more sales? Well, first, we help marketplaces convert more leads into appointments by helping them connect with sellers. We use our engagement platform to send follow-up reminders to agents or dealers after a seller inquiry, and we can notify sellers if they missed a conversation, a call from an agent to re-engage with them. Secondly, we can automate appointments confirmation via SMS or email sent to sellers to save time and resources for C2B marketplaces. Next, to reduce no-shows, we can send reminders, appointment reminders to sellers the day before their appointment to reduce these no-shows and to be notified as a marketplace or as a dealer if the seller wants to reschedule or cancel the appointment. And as the last example about what we can put in place for C2B marketplaces, we can help them re-engage with sellers who rejected their offer by asking them via SMS or email why they rejected the offer and present an alternative offer to try to recover these sellers and to maximize the conversion. So I'm reaching the end of my short presentation now. So this was a snapshot of what we implement for marketplace customers we have, which allow them to generate on average 20% incremental transactions. And I will conclude with a few words about Kaisa for those who don't know us. And so we are the leading customer and dealer engagement platform dedicated to the automotive industry. We've been working with most of the major automotive marketplaces and OEMs for over 15 years now. And today we cover 70% of the dealers in Europe using our solutions. We have 3 million customer engagement that are powered by our solutions every month. And we are headquartered in Uppsala in Sweden. We have offices in London, in Paris, and we operate in 52 countries around the globe. So do not hesitate to contact us to discuss your challenges around car buying or selling experiences. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Matthew. And I'm going to ask you to stay. And if anybody has questions for Matthew, please put them in the chat. And please put your questions in the chat and we will come to them. Can I invite everybody else back on stage and we'll get into the Q&A. So we've got various questions out there. Maybe start with one about the rest of the world. You know, what do these new auction models mean for the historic leaders like We Buy Any Car in the UK? And I guess, you know, in Europe for Verkauf und Dein Auto and its many kind of offshoots across the continent. Anybody want to kick off on that, Matt?
Yeah, I can
you're
kick off on
a
that.
challenger of those businesses, I think.
Yeah, I think from a consumer point of view, it sort of comes down to what I was discussing earlier around the trade-off between effort and value. I think there are still some consumers or some car sellers who that is the best experience for them. They want to sell their car immediately. They want to sell it for a good price and they're not getting another car. But they might take a bit of a hit on the actual price they could get compared to C2B or even a private sale. I think the interesting thing as well, I think about the market is historically the industry is almost like C2B to B to B to C. And actually the new models that CarWow, Motorway and others are sort of scaling, it means that you're able to cut out a couple of those parties that are trying to take that cut in the middle. It takes time going through that C2B to B to B to C process, and the car is depreciating the whole time. So actually, we feel like the new sort of C2B models, we're able to offer better pricing to both end parties, to both the seller and the dealer. So I think ultimately there may still be a market for that, and some sellers still may choose that, but we believe quite strongly in the value that we're providing for both sides.
And I guess the question there, I mean, do you know, I mean, versus We Buy Any Car, do you have a different average price point to them, or is that information not transparent in the market?
It's not that transparent in the market, but a lot of the feedback that we get through sort of Trustpilot and other channels does indicate that we're getting much better prices for sellers. But as I said, we're also asking sellers to sort of go through a different process in terms of the car selling journey as well.
Okay, Julian, can I ask you a slightly different variant of the question? I mean, you know, these sales must be coming from somewhere. Is it mostly that trade-ins are declining, or are you actually taking, you know, share from other C2B players, or are you taking it out of private seller? You know, where's the business coming from?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you kind of look back through time, historically, in the US, the trade-in attach rate on a new car sale was 70-80%. And as new entrants like Carvana and kind of CarMax grew, in my mind, that was one of the key factors that's led to the unbundling of the trade-in in the vehicle transaction. And so now we're in the kind of 45% of all vehicle sales have a trade-in attached to it. And so I think in our view, a lot of the capability we bring the dealers actually brought to them to actually help them increase their attach rate again, because we think that's the healthiest source of inventory for a dealer is straight from a consumer. And so I think that's the main driver for the growth we have ahead of us.
And does the dealers see you as their friend relative to other C2B businesses because you have such a close set of relationships with them, or are you just on a par with everyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's we're all about enabling the dealer body to benefit from technology and data that's usually just available to the most sophisticated dealers, and so that's kind of the notion we have also in the space here.
Now, Ivo, I don't believe you have much competition, so I'm going to ask you a slightly different question. We've got a question here that says, can you explain a bit more why cannibalization is a risk, and how you might see it emerge, and you know, I guess a sense of how the trade-offs also exist between what you earn out of C2B and what you earn out of your private seller business?
Yeah. Maybe to first tell, I think we do have competition on a marketplace front. On C2B, we also have competition, but there's no strong online C2B player. So it's mainly a disorganized offline market. So I think that's the first thing. So currently, the users that want to see convenience and get a fair price, where are they? Right? We didn't know. Are they in private selling? They're trying their luck. They're going through all the hassle of having all these test drives, negotiations. Or do they do trade-in? So we didn't know upfront where this target audience actually sits. So that was, I think, the key challenge, I would say. And in the end, we decided just to launch. We made sure that we had like feature flags behind each entry point. So the moment shit hits the fan, basically we could just switch it off. But yeah, and in the end, it worked well for us. And then in terms of your second part of your question, in the end, you also need to make sure that you monetize accordingly. So either they opt for private insertion or they opt for C2B, you earn the same amount or more.
So you're not cannibalizing in any case because you're taking the same kind of revenue out of a sale either way, or is one of them a more lucrative channel for you? I know we're talking Switzerland. You have a particularly strong private seller kind of business.
Yeah, so I would say currently we're not there yet in extracting the same value, but that would be obviously one of the goals, and then see which other things we could do around that.
Okay, so moving on to a different question. In all cases, you're asset light. Is there any asset heavy in any of your businesses? And can anyone see a reason for doing asset heavy? Can anyone see a reason not for running a mile from asset heavy? Okay, good. And just a quick recap, very quickly, how each of you monetizes with the dealers.
So service fee per successful transaction.
Service fee per successful. Yep, Matt.
Yeah, we're the same.
Okay. And we have and for us it's a subscription, and so it's a feature available for people that subscribe to both our marketplace offering, cars.com, and then the AccuTrade valuation SaaS offering, appraisal and valuation SaaS offering.
So is that subscription graded by the volume of use of the service and information within it, or is it just a one price for anyone?
The marketplace subscription varies based on dealer size and location, but the SaaS offering right now is only one price point.
Okay, so I could take 1,000 cars from your service or one car and I pay the same. That seems unusual.
Yeah.
Theoretically, but it doesn't happen in reality. Okay, so these markets still seem very fragmented. Question here, why are they so disorganized, and what are the trends on them? And I guess, is there a trend towards consolidation, or will there be a trend towards consolidation, or not? Maybe Matt, you're in one of the most competitive C2B markets around. Everybody's doing it here. Only 3 or 4 of you are big.
Yeah, I think it's a good question about why it's so disorganized. I think in the grand scheme of things, the market is still fairly new, or the process of changing your car online is still relatively new. And so I think that in itself sort of provided an opportunity for multiple players to emerge, but at the same time, the whole category requires education for consumers. And so you see a lot of players spending really big into brand marketing in the UK. And I think over time, as people get used to the idea of selling and buying cars online, you'll see it become less and less disorganized. And I think you'll start to see some players becoming bigger than others. But I think it's mainly to do with the sort of maturity of the market at the moment.
So do you think it's winner takes most, as marketplaces tend to be, particularly cars marketplaces, where, leaving the US aside, most mature markets are a single dominant player and the next one is relatively tiny in comparison? Is it that kind of market, or can this be more competitive longer term?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to say. Again, I think there's still so many problems that are still to be solved. I think we've spoken about some of them. I think the UK is interesting because I think Ivo touched on Switzerland being a high trust market. I think the UK is a relatively low trust market. So that sort of damage assessment piece is really interesting. Pricing is really interesting. And I think it's really about who can solve those problems the best. I think right now it's not entirely obvious exactly where that sits and how the shape of the market is going to form around that.
And do you see people then solving those problems in quite different ways across the leading players?
Definitely. I think the themes that everyone is investing in tends to be the same. I think everyone is identifying the same problems, but people are taking different approaches in terms of acquiring businesses who are specialists in that area, investing in building their own capabilities or whatever it might be. But I think, there's a real focus at the moment on really trying to solve the key dealer problems and making sure that we can provide for our partners as best as possible. And so, there's definitely a bit of a race going on there.
Okay, and Julian, are you seeing the US market consolidate, or are you finding you're kind of developing your own segments within it?
I think it's the $1 million question about the future path of the US market, right? I mean, I think it's, if you take marketplaces as an analog in the US, I think you'd believe that the market is big enough for several meaningful players. I think that's a reasonable path or a reasonable option for the future of the market here.
Yeah, but even your market, I mean, if you go back quite a few years, there were probably 5 or 6 decent sized marketplaces. You're now down to really 3, I think. So that's consolidating. But do you think this is a segmented play? I mean, do you think there are actually different segments you can take in with different approaches, or is it one approach fits all as a traditional, marketplace is?
I mean, I think I have the same fundamental view, I think, as we talked about in the earlier questions on like the main segmentation is really kind of like ease versus price realization. And so I think consumer segments evolve on that continuum, right? I think even throughout their own life and their own buying journey. And so I think that from that standpoint, I think there's going to be space for several models to coexist. Yeah.
And that's different from the core marketplace business. I'm going to throw this one at Matthew first. What would you say is the key to increasing conversion from lead to transaction and increasing sellers' satisfaction? I'm going to come back to everyone else on this one in a minute, but what are you seeing from your client relationships? What are the things that really drive in performance improvement? Oh, no sound. We've lost your sound. You got no. Try again. Oh dear, I think we've lost you. I'll go to the others for the moment and yell if you come back. So Matt, you've been around in this game for quite a while now. So what are the things that you've really focused on? What are the biggest levers that have worked in improving the transaction rate?
Yeah, I think the absolute key for us in terms of improving the transaction rate has been building a really robust dealer network who want to work with us, who want to buy cars through us and are engaged on a daily basis. I think if you get that right and you are able to solve problems in a way which means that you have dealers coming back repeatedly and wanting to buy cars from you every single day, it means that the competition in the auction gets better. Suddenly sellers are getting better prices or fairer prices for their car. And actually by solving the dealer problems, you're almost solving the seller problems at the same time. Because a lot of them are coming to us because they see that trade-off between effort and value. So I think that's really the core thing. I think Ivo made a good point earlier around really listening to who your sellers are and who your buyers are and making sure you're solving their specific problems, not the problems that you think exist. And I think if you're able to do that, then actually you'll see transformative results.
And so when you say building the dealer network helps you solve problems, is that about pricing, or is that about quality of dealers, or is that about your ability to get coverage in particular areas? What's the key things it's helping you with on the transaction front?
I think it's all of it, really. I think in having a broad dealer network, I don't just mean geographically, I also mean within segments, within different price bands that they're buying in. It gives you a sort of really robust network, which means that whenever a car appears from a seller, you have a buyer for that car. And ultimately, that's what you're trying to get, is that for every car someone's trying to sell, someone's also trying to buy. Because then you would
it's a network effect, literally a network effect, and probably also in other ways. So Ivo, I mean, you're only a short time in. Ask you a slightly different variant of the question. What's the one thing you're already planning to change that you think will have most impact on the transaction level?
Yeah, so we started off with a kind of a clean variant of C2B, not too many adjacencies or different services. To just see what's going to happen. So we also started off without outbound calls. So normally outbound calling is quite usual within C2B. Whenever people get a bid that's quite close to what they actually wanted, they get a call saying, hey, this is a really good bid. So basically to drive conversion. So the first thing we're going to do is really start with these outbound calls, A/B test, have a group of people that never gets a call, have a group of people that gets a call, and see whether actually this outbound calling is going to drive conversions up faster than costs are going up. So basically look at the variable cost per transaction if you do this. So that's one of the first things. And another very simple thing, what we got from our users is, hey, I don't have space where I can write a free text around my car, right? Because a Renault Zoe has a rental battery or a bought battery. Mine has a rental battery. I couldn't say it anywhere. I couldn't tell that my car had eight tires, so a completely spare winter set, that it was a Swiss edition, like all these things. So we're now making a free text field, like a very simple small thing that we got back from the user surveys that we directly implement.
Brilliant. And Julian, you've owned the business now for a while. What's maybe the one biggest thing that has improved its performance over the time that you've had it? Is there something that stands out as a kind of action you took and has just had a really good impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe how it started, I think the positioning for us is really around like a SaaS offering that helps dealers appraise and acquire cars more effectively. And so we've been really focused on helping dealers be successful at conducting appraisals properly and helping equip them with the right process change and tools so that they can have a a great inspection and feel good about the car and have a great dialogue with consumers. So that's been really the focus, where we see kind of very good correlation between dealer usage and then success over the long term.
And by the way, do you supply the devices that check? Is it the ODB devices?
Yep. Yes, we do.
Do you supply them? So okay, and is it the device that's clever, or is it your software that's clever that understands what the information from the device is really saying? Are you using a standard?
The latter, like the OBD, the device is a fairly commoditized device. It's like anyone can get one on Amazon. It's really more around how do you interpret the output of the device and make that something that's helpful for consumers and dealers.
Brilliant. Unfortunately, we're at the point we've got to wrap, but I'm just going to ask, now that we've got Matthew back, I think the sound is back. Any one thing?
I think I'm back. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. So if I remember, your question was about how to increase the conversion from lead to transaction, and from where we stand as a customer engagement platform. This is all about eliminating all the friction points in the customer journey and the dealer journey as well. And by capturing all the events, all the conversation that happen throughout the flow, and making sure you keep everybody engaged, the seller, but also the dealer or the agent in the contact center, in that process, and that all the information is shared by everyone at every stage of the journey, the selling journey. And to me, that's the best way to reduce friction, to be able to re-engage when you have some kind of friction, the seller or the agent, to maximize transactions.
And is there one friction that has the most effect in your experience at the moment, or?
I would say, like I described in my short presentation, the best or the most impactful friction point is the appointment for the final inspection, to get the final valuation of a car. So no, we're not talking about auction here, but more in-center inspection. We have huge no-shows there, and appointments have to be confirmed beforehand by central teams. This costs a lot of money to the marketplaces. So and we have a lot of drop-off, a lot of costs. So this is a good context for us to help improve the experience and the effectiveness of the relationship.
Brilliant. A huge thank you to all our panelists and to Kaisa for sponsoring this. And I'm afraid there are a few more questions. Some of them are a little bit broader than just the C2B topic we haven't been able to get to. If you really want an answer, drop me a line. Be happy to try and give you an answer on the ones I can answer. So thanks, everybody. And remember, Autos Buzz coming up early next year. Really great discount offers on buying tickets at the moment. My team will tell me off if I don't push it very hard. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.